This episode of Going Forward is brought to you by Optimizer, an award-winning PPC management tool used by advertisers worldwide. Save time and boost the performance of your PPC campaigns on Facebook, Amazon, and Google or Microsoft. Get a 14-day free trial at optimizer.com/go/VIP. All right, everybody, I got someone special on the line. You guys hear me say that a lot, but today, this is the man. He's a legend. He's like a living legend on the line with me right now. I'm going to make him smile just a little bit. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this guy. Started up, you talk about like bootstraps. I don't think he had on any socks when he was pulling up by his bootstraps. $500 in his pocket and to his name. One hell of a dude. And let me tell you, we have a lot of mutual friends, and everyone that I talk to, they have nothing but positive things to say about this guy, because I think in the world of marketing and all this stuff, other stuff you think you hear, people are like, oh, they're full of it. But this guy is like, he's the real deal. He's the real deal. I myself have invested in watching one of their events online. And if you haven't done it, damn it, you better do it. I got none other than Mr. Crisp himself, Michael Mogill, on the line with us, man. Michael, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Man, hopefully I gave you a hell of an intro, man.
Hell of an intro
for you. Michael, man, like I said earlier when we were jumping on this, this is going to be the first episode of, we are rebranding our podcast, and you're the first guest on this, and it's called Going Forward. And it's, having, moving conversations with entrepreneurs and leaders. And I could not think of anyone that I wanted to speak with than you. I was actually in Miami at the last NTL summit, and I walked by the Crisp booth there. And when I got back to Harlan, your good luck charm, Harlan. Yeah. And I said, Harlan, I said, I need you to connect me with Michael. I said, I want to talk to him. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Sure, I'll do it. And, Harlan's busy. He's all over the place. And I said, you know what? I said, there's something about Michael that just intrigues me. And I'm going to tell you what it is, Mike. You don't brag. You're super humble. And you're a good dude. And you give back. And just from looking at you and looking from the outside in, it seems like you really give a damn not only about your clients, but your people. Tell me I don't have this wrong, Mike.
Man, well, listen, I'm humbled to hear that. I really do appreciate that. I mean, it's interesting. I don't always know what the outside perspective is. I know internally, this is our 11th year. Like to me, it's like day one, and yeah. I just see it's just which was me back in my apartment. Then after that, it was a dental practice, and then it just it built. We added a few more people, and the business grew. And I'm not saying this just as like a humble thing. I literally mean it in the sense that I'm just a grown up version of that person. But I don't know that a whole lot has changed, right? Like the mindset has been the same. The hunger is still there. Like just obviously there's a much larger support team. I'm not doing everything by myself anymore. I'm actually we have an amazing team around us that makes things happen. But I think it's just I've been very fortunate to have people around me who keep me grounded. That's and two young girls. I've got an amazing wife. We've got a team that will tell me things are a bad idea, that will shoot down things. That it's just great to have that, right? Because I see a lot of people sometimes go in the wrong direction because they start to feel real good and confident about the things that they're doing, and they think that anything they do, they feel like they have the Midas touch, and then they start to get comfortable, then they get complacent, and then they're not able to maintain that longevity. So I'm a student of a lot of business history, and I've seen a lot of business, leaders that have not been able to, they've had a good year or a good few years, but then you see like this downfall. And what happens? It's either something went to their head, they didn't maintain the same habits that got them there, or they didn't evolve their habits, they didn't evolve their knowledge, they didn't evolve their, their capabilities. And I don't know, I'm one of these people that I look back and say, I don't ever want the things behind me to ever be better than the things ahead of me. So because of that, we keep pushing.
Well, talk to me about the hunger part, man, because you mentioned, you got two girls, you got a wife, you got a family. Right before the call, when we started up, man, you were saying, like you miss them, they're not in the house right now. But Michael, what fuels the fire every day, brother?
I mean, so it's changed over time. I mean, for many years starting out, it was to simply not be broke. That was the goal. That was the vision. That was it.
It's a damn good one.
It wasn't noble, right? It wasn't like I want to help these people. I want to serve people. It wasn't that at all. It was just like, I don't want to be poor. That
Mhm.
was it. Because I grew up and like my family and I, son of immigrants. I'm a first generation immigrant. We grew up in low income housing. I saw all these challenges that were the result of not having money in my family, and then some of the people that we knew as well. And I said, look, when I grow up, I don't want this to be a problem in my life. I don't want this to limit my relationships. I don't want this to be able to limit the things that I can do. So that was where the hunger was, number one.
Yeah.
And then I think that, so what I've seen with money is that it doesn't necessarily change people. It amplifies what's already there. So meaning that I have seen a lot of jerks that were jerks without money that came into money. Like, let's say they achieved the level of business success, and
Mhm.
then they were even bigger jerks. And then I've seen people that were very kind and giving, and they, as they grew in their career, they've been able to give back more. So I think it's just more of whatever it is that you are.
Yeah.
That's what it turns into. So for me, the hunger evolved from being very selfish and about me, and meeting kind of my needs,
Mhm.
to realizing that I really don't have many needs to meet. I mean, if the bills are covered, if my family's taken care of, if just basic life needs are met. I mean, I'm not one of these boat people. I don't need a yacht. I'm not like, I'm not buying skyscrapers. I'm not interested in those types of things. I like to work. I like to, do challenging things, and and gain new skills and gain new capabilities. But my needs were satisfied. So beyond that, it's like, this is all a game we play. And I realized, all right, now I'm getting my fulfillment out of helping others. And that to
Right.
me was much more rewarding, because I realized, look, no matter what kind of car I get, I'm still driving into the office and I'm still there all day. I enjoy it. And then for me, the most important thing is now with like being with my girls, having time and spending time with them, and with my family. So that's, I think when you can have a, so I was reading something the other day, the difference between passion and purpose. Passion is selfish. Passion is like my passion. It's very like me, me, me. Purpose
Mhm.
is about others. And now I get, I'm much more rewarded when I see, like, we had more people, for example, in the last 2 years at Crisp that paid off debt, student loans, and bought homes than in like the last, 8 years prior to that. And then
Mhm.
when I see clients succeed, because we had a client recently, they weren't able to take their family on vacation years ago when we started working with them. This is a coaching client. And like, I think they went on a trip, and the whole time they were stressed out because they were worried about, if their kids wanted to go to the gift shop, if they wanted to go eat something, they were just, could they afford it? And you fast forward several years, and now they leave their office for like 2 weeks at a time, self-managing firm. Now they can, take their family to Disney World and not sweat the costs. Like, that to me is much more rewarding than anything I could do for myself. Like, I'm good. And
Yeah.
I mean that truthfully. It's just like, I'm good. So all of my fulfillment at this point comes from helping somebody else.
I want to come back to that Chris coaching too, because we've seen the ads and hearing you talking about that too. But I want to come back to that one thing about how you say, you've got everything you need. So how do you instill those same things, those same values that you had growing up into the people in your company? Because I mean, basically, you're that leader, and some of what you do is a reflection. What the company does is a reflection of you.
So I don't know that I have a great answer for this. I have a theory on this, and,
Hmm.
and it's actually, it's not even just with team members. I've seen this with clients as well. Like, I tell everybody this: I would love to be in, like, talking to you about like transformation and just giving back to others and all that. But when you are struggling to pay your rent or your mortgage or whatever, like, those types of conversations are very difficult to have. So
Yeah.
let's solve the money problem first, and then, once you solve that, you realize that maybe it really isn't about the money. But I don't know that anyone's really going to believe us if
Hmm.
we don't help to solve that problem first. So it's like everyone says, okay, money doesn't buy happiness, but I
Right.
was always one of these people that was like, well, let me just find out to be sure, right? It's like I kind of believe you, but I kind of need to experience this on my own. So I see this
Right.
with team members. It's like, let's just help you be successful. Let's help you like pay down your loans. Let's help you achieve your financial goals. And then at that point, you'll see that, there's things that are driving you that go beyond money, right? Because you've now had your needs met. Same thing with clients. Let's help you achieve those like financial goals for your firm. But then it's interesting in the coaching programs, what happens is in the first year or two, it's all about like conversations around marketing, conversations around how do we scale revenue.
Hmm.
Those are the types of things we're talking about. But once those are kind of solved to a degree, or once they've achieved one milestone, two milestones, three milestones, all of them, all these conversations start to shift around like, how am I spending my time? How
Right.
can I be, how can I take care of my health? How can I be sure to be there for my family, be there for my community? Because once you figure out how to get the phone to ring, and once you solve really the money problem of like, okay, I'm able to invest in the things I want to invest in, I can hire the people I want to hire, I can develop them and train them, which is, I'm not saying that's an easy problem to solve. It's just that
Hmm.
once that gets handled, like, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's like
Yeah.
once that gets solved, then the next level is, okay, now what? And it's realizing that, okay, you can just make the number bigger, Like you could just, and some people do that. They say, okay, I'm gonna get to 5 million, to get to five, then I get to 10, then I get to 20, then I get to 40. And you're like, look, there really is no, at least in my opinion, there really is no massive lifestyle difference between making 20 million a year, 25 million a year, 20 million a year, and 40 million a year. I mean, you can do the same things, you can eat at the same restaurants. So beyond that point, it's like what keeps you going and what
Yeah.
keeps you driving? Because there's people that are going to be innately competitive and they want to just get a higher number because this is the way they keep score. But
Hmm.
we usually find that like the ones that are the most successful are the ones that their success is a byproduct of serving somebody else. Like they say, okay, the more people I'm able to help, the more people I'm able to serve, whether it's in their community, their team, whatever that might be, as a result of serving those people, then, they continue to grow and become more successful. They don't just say, hey, I'm at 20 million. How do I get to 30 million? The answer is never like work harder, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they're already working hard.
Hmm.
So that's
You
my,
can't buy more time.
yeah, that's my thought on it. I think that otherwise, if you start telling people, no, man, it's not about the money, and they're like, they're legit struggling. They're like, man, I don't know what I'm going to eat tonight. I don't know how I'm going to put my kids through school, or like, I don't know how to do it. And you tell them, hell yeah, you should be focusing on your community and purpose and all these things. And I don't know that I'm being real with you. You say you want to do like
Right.
a real podcast, and I appreciate that. I think
Right.
that you have to help people be able to have some, basic level their needs met, and then they can start thinking about things that go beyond that.
Is that something that's just important in you? I mean, important to you, like every day, you're like, how do I help? How do we serve? This is all good, Chris, we hit these records, but how do we serve? Is that important to you?
Absolutely, it is the main thing, and it's an oddly selfish thing, but it's very selfless in nature. So like it's selfish because it makes me feel good. I mean,
Hmm.
it really is. I mean, that's just you help somebody else succeed. Now it's selfless in the sense that it's actually all about somebody else winning and somebody else succeeding, but it's selfish in that I do it because it does make me feel good. I mean,
Yeah.
that it brings about fulfillment. I sleep better at night. I enjoy what we do. It's also easier to rally a team around, when you're making an impact in other communities. I mean, it's just people feel more purposeful in the work that they do.
Hmm.
So it's a win-win for everyone. But I mean, it really is one of those things. It's like if you ever ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And you see somebody else win, because I'm giving this a lot of thought over the last several years, and this is new for me too. It's like once you hit a certain level, let's say you hit a certain level in the business and you're good, you got a great team, you can continue to do what you're doing. And it's like, but how do you keep pushing to that next level? How do you keep the fire burning? That's a really
Mm.
interesting topic to me. It's like, how do you maintain that same level of hunger? Because hunger to me is easy when it's like when you have nothing, right? When it's just like when you're just in survival mode, that hunger is pretty innate, right?
Hmm.
But how do you keep it going when you got the silk sheets, right? And you got the nice car and you got the
Good
air
point.
conditioning and just how do you really push to that next level? And I think for most people, if in that situation, they would start to dial back and they'd start to say, you know what, I've worked hard. I deserve a break. I deserve to take it easy. They start to talk about all the things they deserve.
Yeah.
And I think the true savages are the ones that continue to press forward and say, hey, this stuff is great, but what's next?
That's true. Because the next level isn't always just revenue. It's sometimes just like you said, just peace of mind. Because there can be some people working like a dog just to be able to get to 50 million or 60 million, and an extra 5 million won't change their life at all anymore.
I think you should always know, like, or at least have an idea as to why you're doing what you're doing. And I think sometimes people just live in a state of autopilot. Where I talked to somebody the other day. I mean, they're on pace for I think 80 million this year, and this is someone that is working their tail off. They don't spend a lot of time with their family. They rarely see their kids. Like,
Mhm.
and I just asked him, I'm like, why are you doing this? And he's like, well, I want to be able to hit this bigger target. And I'm like, well, but at the same time, what's important to you? Like, what are your priorities? It's like, at what point is enough enough? He's like, well, it's never enough. And I
Wow.
understand some of that to an extent, but I also look at it and I say this as like a parent with two kids. It's just we all have different priorities. For me, there's no amount of money that today I would trade off, like being able to spend time with my kids and being able to take my daughter to school. It's just not worth it. You can say, oh, Mike, you can take
Absolutely.
an additional $5 million this year, but you can't take your daughter to school. It's like, nope, not worth it.
No, it's totally right. I think Denzel Washington said a line. He said, "When have you ever seen a U-Haul behind a hearse?
Yeah.
Just doesn't work." I want to go backwards really quick,
Sure.
and also, I read your book, and I want to talk about like Crispin, how you started, and just the adversity, even when you were beginning up, and you had to like stage everything to make it seem like you had employees, and when someone came to check you out, what was that like for you, Mike?
Man, it's very much like fake it till you make it, because I just I learned that I had this conversation with someone the other day. We were talking about luck and like what role luck plays in business, and I really do think that luck. I'm realizing more and more. I think luck plays a much more significant role, but it's a byproduct of being able to take advantage of certain opportunities. Like you still have to be prepared, you still have to work hard, and then you find that maybe you have more lucky breaks. Like you meet someone who connects you with somebody, right? Maybe you wouldn't have met them had you not put yourself out there and like gone to certain events and had certain experiences. So you still had to be there. It was lucky that you met that person, or it was
Mhm.
lucky that you built that relationship, but you still had to engage in the conversation, right? You still had to be at the table.
Yep.
So it's kind of like twofold in that sense. But early on, I mean, listen, we started as a video company. We do video for anyone. We would do anything. Like, we would do, it didn't matter if it was a wedding, it was a soccer tournament, it was a video for Coca-Cola. Like like the one you're referencing in the book, I talk about that, for our first big corporate client. Like I don't name him, but it was Coca-Cola. I think at this point, like uh, it was supposed, I don't know, maybe the NDA's run out at this point. If it hasn't, it is what it is. They can find me.
Well, they
But
heard it here first. That's all right, Mike.
exactly. So this was right around like the FIFA World Cup, and they were producing a lot of content. They were contracting with a lot of different agencies. I had met someone that introduced me to a member of like Coke's digital team, and they were going to give us an opportunity to produce some content for the FIFA World Cup. And they said, well, one of our policies, like, we just want to be able to meet your team. Can we stop by your office? I did not have a team. None of those things really existed. So I called my friends. We went and bought a bunch of iMacs at the Apple store. I put them on my credit card. My friends showed up. I'm like, look, you guys got to look dialed in. We couldn't afford any of the editing software, like any of the Adobe Creative Suite. So we just took like screenshots and made it the background of the screens. And Coke walks in. Everyone's dialed in. I'm like, you guys aren't allowed to answer any questions. So like, just stay dialed in. They come in and say, man, your team's so focused. I'm like, yeah, this is how we work. We work hard. We don't bullshit around here. Then, then as soon as they left and the door closes, I'm like, pack up those iMacs, right? We're going right back to the Apple store and returning these things. So that's where it started.
Yep.
The ironic thing is, like, today, it's like I go downstairs in the office and it's like we've got, I think, like 30 to 35 like editors down there, and it legit looks like an Apple store, right? It's
Mhm.
just like we got like every Apple product. But back then, I mean, I look back at that and someone asked me, like, yeah, but should you have done that, right? Was that like deceitful or whatever? Like, I felt that if we got that project, I mean, you still have to execute on it, right? You still
Yeah,
had to do the work, you still
absolutely.
had to do it well, but no one was going to give somebody an opportunity as some kid in their apartment, right? Coca-Cola certainly wasn't. And if it were not for that and being able to get that start, I don't know that, that it would have led to the next project and the next engagement and the next client. So it's like you need the catalyst somewhere. But I think the moral of the story, more important thing is that, if you do get an opportunity like that, you have to execute. Because I know a lot of people that
Yeah.
they do get an opportunity and they don't, they don't fully execute on it. They don't produce great work. They don't create a great experience. Like, you have to do whatever it takes at that point, because it's table stakes to get the engagement. Then you have to actually follow through on it. And anybody can do something. I wouldn't say anyone, but like most people can do something well one time, but it's
Mhm.
being able to repeat that and do it again and again and again every single
Exactly.
day, day in and day out.
Now, Michael, what's one of the biggest lessons you learned when starting from nothing?
Whew. I mean, countless lessons. I'm still learning lessons. I mean, eh, like, I think the biggest one for me, just the first thing that pops to mind really is just people are everything. I think it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to accomplish anything of significance without building a great team.
Right.
Right? So, and when I look at like different leadership competencies, I used to think, I could work hard. I used to pride myself on that, like on how many hours I could work without sleep, without eating. And I've realized that that's not like a really leverageable resource. I mean, simply being able to trade your time for money is just, it'll only scale you so far.
Yeah.
We all have the same number of hours in a day, so it's at some point you're going to hit your limit. And I learned that painful lesson when I was basically waking up in urgent care because I was just exhausted. And this is kind of early on in my business career. I was an idiot,
Mhm.
um, and probably still am to a degree, but maybe slightly less. But I just think it's realizing that if you can attract great people and get them to align and work with you and be able to row in the same direction, I mean, you can accomplish anything. That's where the true leverage comes from, being able to bring in people with skills and capabilities that you may not have that can help you achieve something. Like today, I think everything that people see from the outside with Crisp and like all of our success is really, and I'm saying this 100%, it is true. This is not a humility play. It is a testament to the quality of our team. It is a testament to like those people, because like they're on the phone with our clients every single day. They're the ones that are running the campaigns. They're the ones that are doing the video shoots. Like this year, we'll do 52 workshops in our coaching program. I run 4 of the workshops out of 52. And it's like everything that happens, like from the person who sets up the events to the person who does like even the summits to like the marketing campaigns we run to the ad spend to the data and analytics to the reporting, that is other people. And I'm just so humbled and honored that I can get these people to come in and actually want to do this together with me. But that's what makes it look great. That's like they, I think sometimes people see me on stage, but then there's a lot of people, there's about 130 people that make that happen. So to me,
Absolutely.
that's the biggest lesson of just, don't go it alone. I think the people that
Absolutely.
try to do it alone, again, another selfish thing, right? They think, well, I don't want to have to pay another person, or it's like going to be this cost or whatever. And it's like to me, somebody asked me, this is an interesting statement he had like a couple weeks ago. And they said, I don't want to build a big business because that sounds like I don't want a bunch of headaches and I don't want a bunch of problems. And I said, look, I've been on both sides, and I wouldn't say we're like a huge business. We don't have like 100,000 employees or whatever, but I'll tell you that I have way less headaches and problems having a great support team around me than I did by myself trying to handle everything, right? From running the payroll
Mm.
to doing the marketing, to doing the sales, to shooting the videos, to editing the videos. I mean, that to me was much harder than when you have people around you who can help you.
Yeah. Amen to that, man. Michael, you mentioned something. Then after this, I want people to hear this, and then I want to go to break. And I got a little surprise for you when we go to break. Um, you mentioned Crisp. You guys are doing videos for anyone else, but when did you make the transition from just saying we're Crisp Video Group to Crisp? And tell me the difference between the two, because there's some people who followed you along the journey and they've never heard you explain it before.
Yeah. So now that I think about it, it was probably at this point, gosh, man, I think it was either 2019 or 2020, probably 2019. And it was kind of like when we went, the Facebook to just Facebook. And what had happened was, I mean, our ecosystem had grown. I mean, people knew us as
Right.
Chris Video. And I got that domain back in the day for like $7. I was just like absolutely thrilled. I got chrisvideo.com and chris.video. And I was like, this is awesome. Right. So it was when our ecosystem had really grown because we were doing videos, then we were doing marketing, then the coaching side started, and it's coaching for firm owners, then coaching for team members. And so the ecosystem had expanded so much that we were so much more than a video company at that time that it was almost inappropriate in the sense that, I mean, like 80% of our client base were coaching clients, right? That even came in as coaching clients that had never even done videos yet. So like at that point, I was like, all right, we got to drop the video because I feel like it's limiting to an extent. And also our ecosystem has continued to grow with Chris Ventures. And we've been like just growing that side of the business and acquiring companies and like just being able to expand our ecosystem that way. So it was kind of the vision for the future of what the company would be. And which started with video, then expanded to marketing, then expanded to coaching, then has expanded to software, and it'll expand beyond that. So I saw it and looked out, 5-10 years, and I said, I think we're going to do a lot more than video. So let's just drop it now. But it's taken years, I think, for people to, I mean, there's some people still call us Chris Video. I mean, it takes time, right? It's like, I guess it was like Apple Computer, then they dropped the computer because they're like, we're going to do more than, creating Macs, so.
I think the important thing, as long as they just call you Crisp, it doesn't matter if they call you Crisp Video or Crisp, or Crisp at all.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So, Mike, we're going to go to break for just a second, and we're going to come back, man. And I want to talk about your journey, and also during COVID, like around that time, you did something that a lot of people wouldn't have done. You signed for a big new building.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about that too. All right.
Yep.
You got a lot of heart, dude. Hey, it's Eric here from VIP Marketing, and I want to ask you, digital marketers, something. Are you frustrated with your current PPC marketing campaigns? Well, I want to tell you about a tool that we use here at our agency. It's called Optimizer. You have the ability to get your reports up to date and make sure that you get alerts on them. You can even work into workflows as well. So if you're frustrated with your campaigns right now in the reporting systems that you use, I want to give you a 14-day free trial of Optimizer. Go to optimizer.com/go/VIP.
The road to success is paved with the ghosts of your past. If you can look through a window into your past, would you recognize yourself? What would your ghost look like? How would it react to the challenges we all face today? Would you have stepped down and cut your losses? Or would you have risen up in the face of adversity? Over the past few years, it's been our honor to stand side by side with you as a catalyst to your growth, an anomaly we call the Crisp Effect. There is a story in your progress, and we want to hear it. We want your unfiltered account of the Crisp Effect on you, your practice, and your life. And most important of all, we want to reward you for leaving your ghost behind.
You ready for this?
Man, how'd you like that surprise, Michael?
Man, I it brought a twinkle to my eye because it brought me back when we were filming that. I remember this was like it was like the streets of Atlanta were like a ghost town because we filmed this in 2020 when I mean this was COVID, everything was shut down. It was like The Walking Dead, and downtown Atlanta has never been that empty. So it made for like great shots that we were just able to drive downtown. There was no cars around. And then I saw like how young I looked. So this was like right as COVID hit, because I think after it just aged me, like what the years that follow would be. This is before the the stadium event. This is before the building, like all that. So I look like this young kid ready to go, man.
Oh man, I thought it was awesome, man. So for anybody just following us, I want to welcome you guys to the Going Forward podcast. This is episode 1, and we started over. We were formerly the Adcast with Michael Mogill of Crisp. I don't care if you call him Crisp Video, but you better call him Crisp. How about that? And we just kind of aired a video where Michael does these him and his team. I don't want to just say Michael, because Michael just went on and said a lot of great things about the people behind him, about the wonderful events that they do every year. I mean, they've given away Teslas, they've given away G-Wagons, they've given a Rolls Royce, and hint, Michael, I want one. So, I want to definitely get into that. But Michael, let's talk about around COVID time. You mentioned, when you filmed that video, the streets of Atlanta were dry, but, around that time, you also did a big, bold move, and you saw forward for your company too. You had a vision for your company, and you purchased your new facility. And there was an old video that you had, and when you guys were exiting the building, you said, "I'm going to be my own damn landlord." And, so tell me about the move, and how'd you get the balls to do what you did during a time where there was a lot of uncertainty?
Man, going back in hindsight, this is another one of those things that people were giving me a really hard time about as I was doing it. That it just, and this is a common theme, by the way. Like any courageous decision or any courageous bet, there's a lot of naysayers and critics and skeptics. Like I was hearing things like, "Man, this is going to be the biggest mistake of your life. Like, don't do it. This is a horrible idea." So we were already kind of busting out the seams at our old office, which was around, I think, like 4,000 square feet. Like we had to like rearrange. We got rid of the desks. We got stools. Like we tried to fit as many human beings as we could in there. And we knew that we'd have to expand in some way. But at the same time, COVID hit. And then people were talking about the fact of like, is anyone even going to come back to the office anymore? Is it everything going to go fully remote? So we didn't know. And we were looking at different spaces. Originally, we were looking at leasing a space, and it would have been at this really nice building, like this kind of brand new building. We would have gotten 2 floors. They would have done this whole custom build out. We came so close. I even showed the floor plan at our year-end all hands meeting, like that December. And I was telling the team, here's what the new floor plan looks like. Everyone gets excited. I had all the documents. All I needed to do was sign them. And I was like running the math, and it would have been like $80,000 to $100,000 a month. It had to be a 10-year deal. Would have been $1.2 million a year, and like it basically, when you lease a space and you pay that amount of money, at the end of the lease, they basically give you a handshake and say thank you very much, and you leave and you get nothing. So
Michael, I'm there right now. I got a 5,000 square foot building that just sits empty, except for the studio part. I'm there with you, man.
So I was like, man, I don't know about this. I was telling my wife, she's like, yeah, I don't know if it makes sense. So then I was like, well, maybe we buy a building. The broker we were working with, I think he was already frustrated because we gotten so far in the negotiations for the lease. I was like, can we look at buying a building? He's like, look, there's not going to be a building. It's 50,000 square feet that you're going to find like anywhere remotely close in Atlanta that's going to have good parking. And then it just so happened that our old landlord at this place we were leasing had bought this whole complex, this like old like corporate flooring warehouse that had 120 parking spaces with 50,000 square feet, and was like, do you want to lease it? And I was like, well, if we lease it, we'd have to lease the whole thing. So could we just buy it? And he's like, all right. So he actually ended up, I got a real bad deal at the time, good deal now. So I paid, like he bought this building, did nothing with it. And basically flipped it to me 2 years later after he bought it for $2 million in profit. Like he made $2 million additional on top of it. So like I paid that premium, but again, I looked at it and I saw, like, I didn't see an old warehouse. I saw like this, this crisp future. And we were going into the build out and we're thinking, how much is this build out going to be? And we're like, okay, maybe like 5 to 8 million. All in all, the whole thing ended up being 20 million. And it was, I mean, every detail, no stone unturned. We were building it for us. I saw this vision that was basically like, look, I think, at the time when we were doing workshops in the coaching program, we would do them at hotels, right? Like the Ritz Carlton or the Waldorf Astoria. But every time we do one of these workshops between like AV, food and beverage, all this stuff, it'd be around like $50,000-$60,000 every time we do a workshop. And like every time we did that, it would just be like the sunk costs, right? So there was really no economies of scale. We also couldn't do workshops whenever we wanted to. We had to base it on when the hotels were available. And we could never do 2 workshops at the same time. There was like all these capacity and space limitations. So I was like, look, I don't know if anyone's ever done this before. I don't know that many had, or at least not in the legal industry, but I'm like, let's have our own facility. We'll have one side that's going to be for the team, then the other side that's going to be more of like a corporate training center, which is where all the workshops are conducted. And then we go, this has happened. We signed on for the building in March of 2020. So like for those listening, you guys know what was going on in March of 2020.
Oh yeah.
There was like 6 closings our broker had at the time. 5 of them had canceled. We were the last one. We signed for this building wearing masks and gloves and like almost like borderline hazmat suits, right? So if you're thinking like making an investment in commercial real estate, at the time, it was not a very popular decision. My immigrant father was like, dude, this is what you got to do, man. We came to this country, you got to own some land, right? You got to own something. You got to have some asset. My dad was like, he's the one who's usually like the one that's super risk averse now. He's like, don't do it. But this one, he's like, go full steam ahead. So the project, was underway. We ended up opening in, I believe it was May the following year, May of 21. And then we did that Evolve Virtual Summit there. And man, I remember when we opened it up, this is always my thought whenever we do something. It's like, man, how are we going to fill this place up? Like we had a capacity, I think up to 300 people that we could have at a workshop at a given time. We could put, 200 team members on the other side. It was this massive space. We had an additional 15,000 square feet. We hadn't even built out yet. We added a second level. And you walk in and you're like, I know sometimes people say if you build it, they will come, but I don't know how much truth there is to that.
Yeah, this ain't the field of dreams, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So we get in and it was, I will say that, so from March 21, we opened up. Last year, there was a day, I remember I was like halfway through the year, I was so thrilled because, just as I said, man, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to fill it up. There's like 3 separate training rooms, like large rooms. You can have like, basically up to 200 people in each one. And on that day, we had 3 workshops going on. Every single room was packed. Wow. Today, we've got 3 going on. This year, we're going to do over 60 of those workshops. And it's just, it's packed all the time. So like it's been incredibly rewarding. It's been one of the best decisions we've made. I've had the building appraised. Like I could probably flip it today. I think for like 8 million more than we bought it for already. It's not going to happen. I didn't buy it as like some appreciating asset to sell it. Like we bought it for us, right? For our team. We're the only tenant in it. We're going to be the only tenant in it. So I guess just from that, from that note, it was a big risk for sure. But now I look back and I'm like, this is one of the smartest decisions we ever made. I got a cost segregation study done on it with the depreciation. I was able to wipe out a tax bill. Like I could go on and on and on. Like this is like probably inadvertently one of the smarter things I've done.
But, now you brought up 2 things. One, I was going to ask you, it's biblical. You got to have vision. Without the vision, man, you people perish, right? How did you see that vision in there? And then I've never heard you talk about Papa Mogill before. Yeah. What did Papa Mogill put in you to make you say, you know what, we're going? Tell me about that.
So when it comes to my dad, for sure, anything I do, and I mean this, like it pales into comparison to what they did, right? So my family and I were refugees. They came over here basically just escaping religious persecution. My dad, my mom, they had to come over and start over. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a nurse. They came over here. Their degrees didn't transfer. My dad becomes a mechanic. My mom's a hairdresser. They don't speak the language. They're in their mid-30s. They've got 2 kids, 2 grandparents. Ironically, they had $500 to their name. That's harder than anything I'm going to do. Let's be real, right? It's like business struggles are tough, but it's like, I'm not, I'm in my late 30s now. And if you said, hey, you got to move to another country, no money, you don't speak the language, you got to take 2 kids with you and your parents, and you got to figure that out. I'm going to say, man, that's harder than anything I've done. So
Dad couldn't go to the Apple store back then and
man, it's
computers and make it look like he was trying to fake it to make it back then.
Absolutely.
No, I agree.
Absolutely. We're first generation. I didn't have any family here. Like there wasn't any of that. So he's been a real good influence on me just from the sense that, for him, it's always like, he doesn't look at these things as like miraculous achievements. He's just like, you're doing what you're supposed to do, right? It's like, man, we invested in you.
It sounds like Dad's got some
He's
tough
like,
love.
this is what you're supposed to do, man. Like, you're son of immigrants. We gave you the opportunity. We sacrificed everything. We didn't eat. Now you get to do this stuff. Like, they look at it as like, this is the expectation. It's almost like if you hire a salesperson and they make a sale and you're like, okay, well, salesperson, right? You did the thing you were supposed to do, right? So I guess that's how my dad looks at me. I think they've been to every single conference. They've been to every single summit. I'm proud of you. I think at the age of 35, maybe 36, that was the first time I heard it. And it kind of said it quickly because he's not like,
it's like, get it out of there.
Yeah, we just get it out of here. Don't say I never said it, and that's it. I'm never say it again. But then on your other question around the vision for just for Crisp and even for the training center and the building, I mean, my thought was always that, look, I'm wearing the shirt ironically that has like the word ambition with the line crossed through it and then commitment below it. And I thought regardless of what was happening in the world, so COVID was happening, there was a lot of uncertainty. We were just as scared. We had just as much. I mean, we're a travel-based company, right? Flights are grounded. Like that, it was putting us in a state of almost like just panic too. But I looked ahead and I thought, well, this is going to pass. And then what happens on the other side? And then how do you want to be remembered when this is over? But I never saw it as an old warehouse, right? I never saw it as like this old corporate flooring company. In my mind, every day, and this is one of those things where I know some people think this is like granola, but I really do think that visualization works. I saw it as like this, like, very modern corporate training facility. We had coaching clients every single day. I would roll up every single day. We'd have like, our team super engaged. We have the clients there. Like, this is what I saw. And like, cause I was here almost every day when construction was happening, we'd come in and like, just have to check on something. And it didn't, it didn't look like anything until it started to. But in my mind, like, I never saw this old abandoned warehouse. I always saw it the way it is now. Like, that's just what it was. Every morning, if I'd be cycling, if I was running, what I was doing, I was always in my mind. That's what I was visualizing. I always saw it like, here's what it's going to look like when it's done. So I don't know if it's just like unwavering belief or, alternative one could argue that once I signed those papers, it was just, that's it, man. I'm in.
There's no turning back then.
That's right.
Michael, there's going to be some law firms who may listen to this and they're going to ask, well, Mike, you did videos for dentists, anyone else, Coca-Cola, like we talked about in the beginning. Why law firms?
So law actually happened for us by accident. When we started, we were very broad. We were working with like Coca-Cola, Red Bull, Verizon. We'd work with all professional services. It was like dentists, audiologists. I mean, just anything. We were filming bar mitzvahs. We filmed soccer tournaments. We filmed at a beef jerky outlets. Like, just financial services, everything.
Yeah.
And we really had no focus, which at the time I thought, why limit that, right? We could just be video for everyone. And we had a lawyer who came to us. She had no online presence, great attorney, but just couldn't really get her name out. And we helped produce a number of videos for her. This was back in 2013, I believe. And her business explodes, right? The barrier to entry on digital and social, like everybody was, a lot of big advertisers were very much focused on traditional, like billboards, TV, radio, and social media was very much in its infancy when you see like platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube. So, this is when you were able to get a lot of organic reach, and her business grew tremendously. Then we worked with another law firm. Same thing happened. I didn't know anything about the legal industry at the time. But as I learned more and more, I saw that here you have this super competitive, super saturated, super commoditized business where like law firms are struggling to stand out and differentiate. You have firms that have a ton of resources that can afford like TV, radio, and billboards, but most law firms can't. So how do you help to level the playing field? Because we always say like the best cases go to the best marketers, which is an unfortunate truth.
It's true. It's so true.
It's unfortunate.
Someone about that today.
Because there's a lot of great lawyers out there that if they could just get their name out, like that, they are the better option for a lot of people in their community. So we wanted to bridge the gap between the best attorneys and the best marketers. So essentially, I realized that what our business is really good at was to help people stand out and businesses stand out that we're in super saturated, commoditized markets where it's super competitive and they need to differentiate and they need to tell their stories. And as we started to really focus in on legal more and more and more, we started saying no to everything else. And that's where the business really started like exponential, just explosion.
When I first started out in media, I was with radio and television and all that stuff years ago. And one time, automotive was like the big player in advertising. And then it just seems like the law firms just kind of did exactly what the automotive people were doing it. They were tunning it on television, tunning it on radio, billboards in the sky, and newspaper and everything else. So that's what the car dealers are doing. Now you see the lawyers almost doing the same thing. Do you see it like where, like, you look at a law firm and just say, like, dude, just wake up? Are there still some law firms that say, you know what, I'm a great lawyer, I don't need all this stuff? I mean, what do you say to those people?
It used to years ago. These used to drive me crazy because I wanted to help everyone, and like and every time I get on the phone with somebody, I wanted them to succeed so much that when they either wouldn't heed my advice or feedback, which I mean, again, it's up to them. I mean, if you run a business, you're in control 100% of your decisions, right? At the end of the day, but
Mhm.
it would pain me when like I wanted their success more than they wanted their success, and this would keep me up at night. And I remember reading this like Dan Kennedy quote. I don't remember it exactly verbatim, but the idea is that you can empower somebody with the information and you can empower them with like the tools they need to succeed, but ultimately it's on them to actually, do something with it, right? You can't lose sleep over somebody that doesn't want to help themselves. So there's those that like they still think like advertising is an abomination to the legal profession, or lawyers that advertise are not great lawyers. I mean, those guys are struggling so much. I mean, a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
the traditionalists, their phone's been ringing less and less. They've relied primarily on referrals. The referral sources are starting to die off. They get frustrated when they see young lawyers that are really doing well on social media or outranking them on search. They're like, why is this happening? And it's just because the landscape has evolved. And I think it's a necessary part of any business with new things coming down the pipe and just in terms of how consumers make decisions and new technologies, that it really is grow or die. And if you don't evolve, you'll become less competitive every day.
That's your next t-shirt, grow or die.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree with it 100%.
All
There is no staying in the middle. There is no staying stagnant. Like it just doesn't exist. I know sometimes people debate me on this. They'll say, "Well, I don't want to grow this year. I don't want to go back. Can I just maintain?" And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Well, sometimes like the only way you can maintain is if you can agree to get everybody else who's your competitor to also maintain, right?
Mhm.
Because if they're getting better and they're improving and they're answering their phones a little bit better and they're say they're growing their brand a little more, they're training their team, but you're becoming increasingly less and less competitive because there's other killers out there, quite frankly. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
it's like people listen to this podcast, like they're the very killers, right? I mean, they make it harder for other people. It's just the nature of the game. It's the game of business. I think it is the most savage, game and sport there is out there. So there's no maintain. And sometimes you actually have to work. I know John Morgan actually shared this with me at the last conference. It's like sometimes you got to do even more and you got to work harder just to stay where you are, because you sometimes have to get better
Right.
just to maintain, if that's what someone's definition is. So meaning that if they had, an X, revenue year, profit year the previous year, to have the same thing this year, they have to work harder. Sometimes you have to work 20%, 50% harder.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, I mean, there's such a shakeup happening right now with law firms, because I mean, you have it now where some states have already approved, non-lawyer owners.
Yep.
What do you see as the future in that? I mean, what do you see the future of that being?
Well,
For
so loaded question, but it's here. It's here. So there's like the Rule 5.4 being eliminated in Arizona with the alternative business structures. You see this type of the stuff that's happened in other industries. You see it happen in healthcare. You've seen it happen in the dental industry. The legal industry is a larger industry than even the dental industry. So it's twice as large. I think it's like a $370 billion industry. And yet, as of last year, there's no law firm in the world that represented more than 1% of gross legal fees paid annually. So it's a very fragmented, like just very
Mhm.
fragmented industry. And when that exists and you've got private equity and hedge funds and venture capital, they look at that and say, we got to start consolidating. We're going to start buying up these practices, combining these practices. The same thing that's happened in dental, same thing that's happened in the
Yep.
medical field. And so there's two sides to it. I think one person looks at that and they're scared to death. They're like, man,
Mhm.
we're going to have people coming into this industry that are incredible operators, Fortune 500 CEOs. They're going to have limitless budgets. They're going to be able to drive up case of acquisition costs. It's just going to make it very difficult to compete. They're going to attract great talent. On the
Yep.
other side of that, someone can look at that and say, this is going to create a lot of really great opportunities. I'm going to be able to attract, a lot of great talent where I can offer compensation packages to non-lawyers to be able to bring them into my practice so I can have like really great operators. I'm
Wow.
also going to be able to gain funding that right now is just, at probably much more preferable rates because there's going to be a cash infusion. And if you're
Mhm.
a law firm listening, you'll get it and say, look, if I decide to sell my practice today, the only buyer that I have potentially is another law firm. So that's going to limit your options. Like if only another law firm can acquire you. But if your buyers can be expanded beyond law firms and you've got VCs and you've got hedge funds, the valuation you can gain for your law firm to get someone to buy in or even buy out the practice is going to be exponentially higher. That could be your long-term exit plan.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good that comes with it, but I think there's always two sides. One side's freaked out, the other side looks at it and sees opportunities. I don't see much utility for being the side that's freaked out, because it's here regardless. It's the same thing when you have the conversation around AI, artificial intelligence, or any sort of evolving change. Like even during the COVID era, people moving to like Zoom depositions, voice over IP phone systems, e-sign. It's like, look, you can fight it or you can embrace it. And the ones that fight it are usually, they're the ones in the graveyards.
Yeah, the genie's out of the bottle and ain't going back, man.
That's right.
That's just the way I see it with a lot of this stuff. I mean, how about, because I see a lot of elder law firms, I mean, owned by, folks who've been around for years. They're selling out to the younger guys, the guys who've got the energy, they're more aggressive. Are you seeing a lot of that happen with law firms now too?
We're seeing more and more. I mean, in some cases, we're seeing law firms that, there's what it costs to acquire a case through marketing, but then they look at it and say, well, we could acquire the inventory of a practice, and that's has a lower cost of acquisition for us than if we were trying to just market to in our community and try to acquire those cases. So they could acquire the inventory of another practice. Sometimes there's people that, like to your point, that are it's an older law firm owner. They're tired of the stuff. They don't want to run the practice anymore. They, in fact, they actually enjoy the legal aspect. And maybe they still want to go to court and they want to go to trial, but they don't want to worry about getting the phone to ring, getting cases in the door. So they're more receptive to being able to sell the practice. So, again, there's benefits to both sides. But we're certainly starting to see a lot more acquisitions and a lot more expansions happening that way. But for people who are doubting the 5.4 stuff, like I hear people say, yeah, that's in Arizona, and then Utah launched their sandbox program, and then it gets shot down somewhere. But there are no borders anymore, right? Like there's nothing stopping a company, let's say, that forms an ABS in Arizona, let's say they're a lead service, from getting leads in Texas, right? And then sending out those leads. It's like they may not be incorporated in Texas, but there's nothing to stop them from being able to operate there. So just because the law is different in a different state or your state doesn't mean that limits somebody geographically.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting super competitive now, even just with that. I mean, it's a great example on how they don't have to like operate like in Texas, but send the lead somewhere else, and run a law firm that way. I mean, what are three things that you would tell like a law firm coming in that they need to do to be successful? Because every single one of them are coming, they're looking for the magic pill, like Morpheus and Neo. Everyone's like, what do I do? What do I do? What do you think are three things that law firms should do? I mean, it doesn't have to be the be all end all, but what are three things that they should be doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, number one, you've got to find a way to differentiate and stand out, right? You don't always have to be the best, but you certainly have to be different, because there's just a lot of competition out there, and you have to find ways to be able to stand out from that competition. Whether it's, in many cases we see it's telling your story, to be able to like just humanize your firm, like what you're all about, why you decide to practice law. It's conveying your why. And you can do that in a lot of formats. I mean, video being one of them, but you can do that in a lot of other ways. That's number one. Number two, get known. It is impossible to hire, a best kept secret or a law firm that nobody knows about. And getting known means whether you're active in your community, whether you're active on social media, this stuff is, I mean, it's still optional, but it's, I think it's only optional if you have no desire it's optional if you want to stay broke. I'll put it that way. So you have to get known. You have to be able to get your message out there. Someone cannot hire you if they don't know you, that you exist. And, the trouble I think sometimes is that if good lawyers don't advertise, the bad ones are already going to do it regardless, right? So the ones that you don't like, they're out there. So it's you at this point, if you really believe in the work that you do, I think you have a responsibility and perhaps a duty to get your name out there. So those are probably the first two. And then the third one is just, you got to find ways to be able to attract the right talent for your firm and to build a great culture, because culture becomes that competitive advantage. Let's say you differentiate, you stand out, you get known, but then what happens, when the phone is answered? Do you live up to your marketing? Like, do you have the right team in place? And usually, a large majority of frustrations happen because someone either has the wrong person in a seat, or they just don't even have someone in a seat that they need to be able to expand. So what happens is you have a firm owner that's working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, and they're exhausted, and they're saying, man, I need more leads, I need more cases. That would be the worst thing that could happen to them, right? Because you're already working 80 to 100 hours a week.
You can't handle anymore.
The last thing you need is the phone to ring more. So, it would be like a death sentence. So you've got to find ways to not necessarily get, do more, but get more done. Right. So like, you don't need to add things to your to-do list. And the only way they do that is to be able to expand your capacity. And I think that's done with people.
Michael, I want to ask you this question, then we'll take a last break. And, I believe I've always been one of those that believes imitation is the best form of flattery. And I've seen a lot of people try and duplicate your event. you know, and you know, and you're always very even keel about it, but you still focus on giving people a great experience. And one of the things I read that you said is you're relentless about people having a great experience with Crisp and you, your team, and everything else. And I love that. But I mean, tell me, now that we're talking about differentiation, what is it that you do to differentiate your event from anything else, taking away the cars?
Yeah. So, there's the cars. I don't know if a lot of people have said that, but it's actually surprising how little the cars do in terms of really differentiating the event. We've done it because I think it gets people excited. If we could give away like a Toyota Prius and get someone excited, we do that instead of a Rolls Royce. But I think that's important. My view is that people want to be entertained, and when they're excited and engaged, they learn better and they remember things better. So a
Mhm.
lot of times, if you go to an event, and I remember going to a lot of different legal conferences, there's some really good ones, but I would go and I'd realize that what would happen is people would show up for the cocktail hours, but most of the time when there's sessions going on, people are in the back, they're on their phones, they're on their laptops, nobody's paying attention. It's a very forgettable experience. I went to one conference, all they served was like bread and cheese. I don't remember any of the speakers, any of the sessions. I just remember the bread and cheese, and that's what I came away with. So
Right.
I learned very quickly that like they may forget some of the topics, so what some of the sessions were on. They're never going to forget the food. But I think a lot of the big differentiators for when we do like the Game Changer Summit, for example, that has always been how do we bring in the best speakers, like speakers where you wouldn't see them on at any other conference because you know I say this respectfully, but there's a lot of people and a lot of lawyers that you see, they speak everywhere, man. They speak at all the
Yeah.
same conferences. You see them at
Yeah.
one, you see them at the next one, you see them at the next one. And it's like, don't get me wrong. It's not that they're good speakers, but you can see them anywhere. And we wanted to do the type of event where there would be speakers that you don't see everywhere else. So that's number one. Two, there's the production. Like we basically looked at like a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within mixed with Salesforce's Dreamforce conference and a rock
Mm.
concert. And we're like, let's do big sound, big lighting. Let's just make this the kind of thing where it's impossible for you to sit in the back and check your email, right? Like this has got to be like, let's make this an event. Let's make this an
Love that.
experience. That's what people are going to remember. And then you just level it up. So you've got like great content, the great production, and then everything else from the food to like the way somebody's welcome when they walk in the door to like every single element like we think about. There's like hundreds, if not thousands of details. And when you add them all up, people are like, damn, that was incredible, right? Like that was just as absolutely becomes transformational for people.
Yeah.
And again, the last one, this was the crazy one, the one at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Probably took a few years off my life doing this thing. I don't know if anyone's done a legal conference in a football stadium, but man, that thing kept me up all night, all year long. I was like,
It's
God, I
that's
hope
a
we can pull
big
this thing
venue,
off.
brother. That's a big venue.
We just, I remember leading up to it, like the Mercedes-Benz let us use it to film some content. And every time I walk in, that place was empty. And I was like, God, it was like the building all over again. I was like, have I made the biggest mistake of my life?
Mm.
Do we overreach? So it's doing something like that. But then I knew like when people walk in here and they walk in on the field, because we did it like the field level, you're walking in right where the Super Bowl happened, where the Falcons play, like where the Rolling Stones play. I mean, you walk in
Mhm.
and you're like, wow, like this is wild. Like this
Yeah.
the Warriors is like a legal conference. And we had Arnold Schwarzenegger and we had David Goggins and I think we had Kevin O'Leary and Cy Wakeman and like
Camille Vasquez.
I mean,
Yeah.
we have Boys to Men that did like a private concert for everyone. I mean, I think about that and I'm like, look, this is awesome. This would be great. Like the greatest tragedy is that we can't attend our own event.
Wow. Now, I want to ask you this. I'm putting you on the spot now.
Yeah.
So there's been tons of great speakers there. Give me a speaker. Tell me a speaker that just blew you away.
Yeah. So the last one, I've kind of predicted this because internally we always talk about the speakers, and I'm like, all right, this one's going to sell a lot of tickets, and this one's going to get a lot of people there, but I think this one's going to be the one people remember and really love. And for me, it was Jesse Cole from the Savannah Bananas. Like this guy shows up in a yellow tux, and like just they're
Oh
already
my
going viral
gosh.
on TikTok. And I'm just like, this guy's gonna blow everybody away. And I remember leading up to the event, people were like looking at the flyer, the promotional materials, like, it was this guy in the top hat. It kind of looks ridiculous. I'm like, this guy's gonna be the most memorable speaker from the event.
Yes, Michael. No kidding. I said to my wife, because I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, not too far from Savannah. And when they started, being on Facebook, I was like, "Hey, let's go see this." And my wife's an old softball player, and she's like, "It's not, close to baseball. It's almost." People were thinking it's a mockery of the game,
Yeah. Yeah.
but man, I'm telling you now. I mean, great choice. So now let me ask you this: what's the one speaker like when they speak, they just punch you in the gut? Like
Cool.
everything that you hear from them is just like, "Wow, that touched me."
I mean, so The first one that comes to mind is David Goggins. I mean, because David's incredible. He's the real deal. Like, what you see is what you get. David's the same backstage as he is on stage. He actually was someone that we were fortunate enough to get to speak at our first conference, and this is right before David's book came out. This is before people really knew, the David Goggins brand. So it was an honor because David, I mean, he may speak at like maybe 2 conferences a year or something. He just David doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do. I'll put it that way.
Oh yeah.
So. So I'd say, but when he speaks, like it's just at that point that no one can have any excuses for anything. You just got to get up and go, and that's actually why. Like I remember at the first event we had David close out the night, and this was at like he went on stage I think 6:30 p.m. and you think in most conferences, but 6 o'clock, man, the room's cleared out. We had everybody there. It was 7 p.m. The whole room's still packed. This is at the first Game Changer Summit in 2018, and then at this one, my priorities were different because I was like, all right, I know we can get him there that first night, but I'm going to get him back because people in Atlanta, like they're going to go out that first night. I need him back in the morning. So we put David as the first speaker on day 2 and everybody rolled back in. So he's just the perfect one to get people, back into gear. Because, people fly out to these things. I realized this is another reason we do it in Atlanta and not in Vegas or Miami. I think it's some of those places. It's like the location becomes the destination, right? Like I'm going to go out in Vegas or I'm going to go out in Miami. They're like everything but the conference. In Atlanta, I mean, it's not Vegas or Miami. I think you can still have a good time, but we like the event to be the destination. We like for you to come to be at the event itself, not to, do everything but the event.
Man, Michael, we're going to take our final break, man. And I want to come back and I want to talk about the book. And then I want to know, do you have another book in you? I want to tell everyone, stick with us. Michael's giving it all to us today, man. Great episode today, Michael. Last break, and we're going to come back, man. And we're just going to talk about that book of yours. All right, buddy.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Hove. H to the O-V. I used to move snowflakes by the OZ. I guess even back then you can call me CEO of the ROC. Ho, fresh out the frying pan into the fire. I be the music biz #1 supplier. Fly it in a piece of paper bearing my name. Got the hottest chick in the game wearing my chain. That's right.
Man, sheesh. I love that.
Oh, thank you, man, Michael. Come on, man. We've seen so much heat from you guys over the years, man. I want to tell you, Michael, I'm very impressed with what you've done. I love how you treat your people. I love how you treat your clients, people that partner with you. Chris, we call them partners. But I'm just very impressed, Michael, with what you've done, and my hat's off to you. And for anyone listening, I mean, this guy, like you said, David Goggins is what he is in front of the stage and also behind the stage. I believe the same is about you, Michael, man. So proud of you. You got a lot to be proud of, brother. So last thing, the book. What in the hell made you write a book? And how did that come about, brother?
So the book came out October 2018. I started it, I believe it was towards the end of 2017. And really what it came down to was just that, like, I knew a lot of people that just weren't ready to work with Crisp, whether it was just too early for them as a practice, whether they just couldn't afford our services, or whether it was somebody in law school. And I thought, look, let me just put all the information, everything we've learned, like all the different tactics, all the strategies into this book. It was like video marketing, like for lawyers, and it could be a DIY book. And then because I knew, and I'll also tell you, like, it was an important lesson. I had a mentor at the time was like, look, there's going to be the people that do it themselves, but your clients don't want to do it themselves. So just put all the information in there. Like, it'd be the kind of book that you don't need to hire us. Like, you can actually do everything that's in the book. You can be very, very successful, but our clients don't want to do it. Right. So I didn't see it as something that was going to prevent us from growing. It was just a way to be able to get information out there and make it more accessible for people and get, the business of law in the conversation. So I wrote the book. And at the time I was like, look, I don't know if anyone's going to read this book. I told over it, and we have like so many great clients. They get calls like to this day, because a lot of the case studies we put in, I didn't know this at the time, but you got to be really careful about like who you put in the book, because if it ever takes off, then they start getting calls. And I had clients calling me that were like, man, like, I'm still getting calls. Like, the book is more popular today in 2023 than it was in 2018, which is actually kind of cool. Do you think like
I thought it came out in like 21, 22.
That's October 2018, right before the first conference, because my aim was to be able to hand them out at that conference. And it's amazing how like I wanted to make sure in the book that I wouldn't date it. So I didn't talk about like here's specifically how you launch a Facebook ad, right? Like, I didn't want to talk like platform specific about like in the platform, here's the user interface, like, because I knew all those things would change. I knew the platforms would evolve over time. Like, TikTok didn't exist, like, just all that would continue to evolve and change, but the principles, like, those would hold up, right? Because the principles of marketing hold up, the principles of brand, the principles of differentiation, all that stays true. So that's where the focus was in the book. And it was very much like a legal marketing book.
In reading the book, what I liked about it, and I did the audio version of it, what I liked was you weren't selling.
Yeah.
You weren't selling. It was almost like you were coaching, and then you were talking about like John Barry and how all that came to be. That was really cool in the book. Mike, we talked about family being important. We even mentioned Papa Mogill. You have a rock in your family, and her name is Jessica Mogill, man. And you see, the minute I say Jessica, Michael just lights up, y'all, for you, anyone who's going to see this on YouTube. But, Mike, how important, I know she's important to you, but how important is Jessica to Chris? Because, like, when I see Michael, I see Jessica, it's almost like one and the same.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can answer this really simply. Like, no Jessica, really no Chris. I mean, yes, I started the company, and yes, but when Jessica came in, like when she came in to join me at Crisp, and I remember we were just right when we first started dating, I was telling her, hey, I got this startup, I got this company, we're working with Coca-Cola, but everybody in Atlanta is working with Coca-Cola. So it wasn't, I was just trying to impress her. And then it was after probably a year in where I was like, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm flailing. Like, I can't figure out this people game. Like, I can't find good help. Man. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you just come in for 30 days and help put some processes in place? And 30 days have turned into, just almost like a decade now. But she was the structure, the infrastructure, the operations arm of being able for us to do everything, of me being able to make an idea real, of being able to really execute on something, to be able to scale everything that we were doing. So every idea that I had, every vision that I had, I mean, that part is relatively easy. She was the one that would actually help to make that happen and put those pieces in place. She built out our hiring funnel. She built out all of our processes. She would help to actually scale our operations nationally. Like, all that stuff was Jessica. So it's, we built it together. I mean, very much so. And I joke about this. I've said, like, if you've ever seen the movie Southpaw with like Jake Gyllenhaal, like we kind of have one of those stories. Cause like when she met me, I was like a penny stock, right? I didn't have any money. She was doing better than I was. She was a successful consultant, right? So like, she didn't need me. And like when she came on board, like I still don't know necessarily what she saw in me. Maybe it was like, I see someone, he's driven, he's trying. I was not successful, but at least I was getting after it. So I think maybe that's attractive to women, right? At least you're getting after it. Like, that's what, because it's like, I joked with her the other day. I was like, look, I know what's not attractive to women. I know, like, sitting at home, just like, I don't know, smoking weed, doing nothing, no goals, no, like, nothing. Like, that's probably the most unattractive thing to a woman. So maybe if you do the opposite of that, that would be considered attractive. So that's at least that's my theory. So, so she basically, like I said, she got in right on the ground floor. I mean, it's just, and we built it together. I never had to explain anything to her. Like, we would be in there, 7 days a week, Saturday and Sunday. It was actually interesting because we just got past Memorial Day, and I was telling her, I'm like, man, this is like our second Memorial Day in 11 years. We've been able to like just not go into the office, because I always viewed those days, like if it was like Memorial Day and Labor Day, I was like, here's an extra day. I get an edge, right? Like somebody else's, someone's going to be at the lake or whatever. I can be in the office. I can gain that extra edge. And I do think it helped over the years. But now, like, I mean, you'd have to pry me away from the kids, right? Like, I absolutely am so grateful that we can be able to spend that time together. So it's just great to have done it together. It's not for everyone, I think, to work with your spouse. Fortunately, we are on very opposite sides of the business. She's very much on the operations. I'm on the marketing and sales side. But it's been an amazing match, and without her, none of this stuff would exist today.
Man, shout out to Jessica Mogill, man. Shout out to Jessica Mogill, man. And Michael, let me ask you, what's a quote that you live by?
Quote. Let's see. I had a good one the other day. I was actually, I don't know if I say I live by this one, but it's like, I want to give you a good one. That's the thing now that I'm thinking.
Bring it, Michael.
Gosh, let's see. Maybe winners live where quitters quit. Maybe that's one that comes to mind. Maybe that's one. Or another one recently I've been loving, where it says like the fastest way to become unpopular is to win consistently. But actually, you know what? I got you. Thank you for giving me this time, because I shared this quote at our last workshop, and I love it. Is half of being smart is knowing what you're dumb at. And that is like my life in a nutshell. It is just basically me realizing here's what I'm good at, and anything that I'm not, that's not my strength, I've been able to attract great people that have helped to move that forward. So the lesson is like, you don't have to be good at everything. You can find out what your strengths are. And instead of trying to improve on weaknesses, you just hone in on the things that you're good at, and find, great people who are strong and can complement you in many ways.
There was something I saw Joe Freed posted a while ago on LinkedIn, and he was, people always say, kind of go with the flow, go with the stream. He said only dead fish actually go downstream. And
yeah, you got to swim upstream.
You got to swim up, man. Michael, what would you today, rubber stamp this point in time right now, go back when you first started Crisp? What would Michael today say to Michael back then?
Well, so I never knew what the journey would be like. So, and I think that was actually one of the positives, because if you would have told me, if you would have laid out the blueprint then and said, here's all the things you're going to go through, here's all the adversity, here's going to be the people that just cheat you and steal from you, and like there's just going to like not do good business and like all these things, I'd be like, oh man, I don't know if that's for me. So unfortunately, I didn't know that at the time. But if I could go back and tell young Michael something, like especially in Crisp, I'd say, look, man, start documenting it then. Because it's as it grows, as it becomes more complex, it's like you're going to want to document those processes, and it's easier if you can start finding ways to replace yourself and kind of take yourself out of certain functions earlier on. There's no nobility in doing everything. There really isn't. I mean, it's not good for anyone. It's not good for your team. It's not good for your clients. So if I could go back, I think we would have started documenting earlier, starting to put processes in place much earlier, and scaling that infrastructure earlier would have saved a lot of suffering, I think, early on.
That's a good point. Everyone thinks the CEO means the chief executive officer, but sometimes they're the chief everything officer is what it turns out to be.
Exactly.
Michael, you have been a fantastic guest, man. I enjoyed my time getting to know you and actually talking to you. Thank you to you and your staff. I want to thank our listeners again for listening to the first episode of the Going Forward podcast with our guest, Michael Mogill of Crisp. Didn't care if you call him Crisp Video Group, you better just call him Crisp. Michael, how do people find you, get in touch with you, learn about your company?
Yeah, so I'm at Mogill, Mogill, on pretty much every social platform. My website's michaelmogill.com. Crisp is crisp.co. And that's it. Social, website, those are probably the best ones.
Awesome. And how about some events? What's the next big event coming up?
So we're going to announce it soon. It's going to be the next Game Changer Summit. It's going to be this November. This is 2023 Game Changer Summit. That one is not going to be open to the public. We're going to do that event a little bit differently. It's going to be a members-only event for our Crisp Coach members. But we do events throughout the year that are open to the public. We call them our $1 Million Days. So we're about to announce another one coming up in July.
That is awesome. Michael, thank you so much, man, for being a guest on Going Forward. Thank you for your time, man, which is a really valuable asset. Regardless of how much money in the world we get, we can never buy it back, man. Thank you so much. And everyone, this is Going Forward. I want to thank you all for giving us your most valuable asset, your time. And also a huge thank you to our sponsors over at Optimizer. For all of you who are running PPC campaigns and you want to see how to do it better and get better results and actually boost the performance of your campaigns and save time, get a free trial at optimizer.com/go/VIP.